Electronic Arts, Rockstar, Activision. They all have actually arms in blockchain because you can look
Mm.
at patents that are being filed. You can see the things that they're doing. The same thing with banks, the same thing with credit cards and all these different companies. Everyone's wanting a piece of the pie. But what they're not doing is showing their hand because
Yeah.
once they do, everything changes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tellr Podcast. We've got an awesome episode for you today. We've got a special guest who is a blockchain advisor and enthusiast. He's been deep in the Web3 space since 2021, coming to Web3 with over 15 years of experience in omnichannel marketing, attribution, mobile marketing and payments, performance and affiliate marketing, and product development. And if you're in Web3 now, you might be familiar with his work across some leading projects, some fun projects in the space, including DLab Games, Pewcast, Rug Radio, Wolf Web 3, Mixie AI, and Mycelium. And he's also the alpha head for Michelin Web 3 North America. Welcome to the pod today, the Shaolin, aka Daryl Quan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited.
Likewise, we've got our first remote episode here, so honored to have you be the one joining us for this momentous occasion.
Man, thanks very much.
No, it's a great pleasure meeting you. We had spoken a little bit before, and I will tell you, this is kind of a vibe, 100%. This is one of the cool things that not only know what you guys do, but also having this opportunity to speak with your community as well as mine, and looking forward to the conversation. Although I will tell everyone, they didn't tell me what I'm going to talk about, so this is even better that we get to do this ad lib,
Yeah.
improvised, and more importantly, real, right? If you're talking about transparency and authenticity, this doesn't get better because I really don't have any idea what we're going to talk about.
Perfect.
This
Keep
is
it simple.
exactly what we do. Yeah. Perfect for us.
Well, I guess to jump right in, so we see you're rocking the Killer Bears PFP across socials. So
Mm.
are NFTs dead? What's up with NFTs? When Floor Moon?
This is such a great question because one, is it not only being talked about currently in the meme super cycle, as they want to call it. I do also enjoy memes, but I think it's super interesting because for me, digital identity is a very important part of who I've become in terms of not only Web3 and blockchain, but just kind of the communities that I've learned to kind of grow into and the founders and the people that I meet. And so for me, it's definitely not dead. I do think the iteration and the expectation that we're all of a sudden going to have these crazy whitelists in terms of grinding, that we all of a sudden go from a mint that costs $100 and instantly make 1,000 to 10,000 as it was in 21, 22. I do believe that when it comes down to it, most people here are financially incentivized to be participating in crypto and blockchain. Just the nature of how the beast is how most people are onboarded. But for me, really, it does come down to why people stay. um, I love the community incentivize like um, behavior that NFTs promote and they provide. And I'm actually a big proponent, to be honest, about hybrid NFTs and 404s. And so if you don't know, or if our audience doesn't know who they are or what that is, it's basically combining and alternating between non-fungible and fungible tokens so that you have both liquidity as well as a unique PFP. So if you decide to liquidate and say, hey, I want to sell it, I no longer need it, you can then, you know, burn it and put it into the pool, or you can actually, if you earn enough for a little bit, and I think this is a great use of the technology, actually accumulate enough so that you can build a PFP and then be part of a more unique identity. Because whether
Mm.
it's a meme coin or NFT, you really do have community, you do have culture, and you do have mimetic value. And I believe all of those things are valuable in terms of what NFT stands for. So the short answer is no, absolutely not. But in
Yeah.
terms of the previous iteration and the utility, 100%. I think that part of it is dead only because there was no revenue stream model, and the fact that they then removed royalties, which was the significant revenue stream that made it successful in terms of sustainability,
Mm.
has definitely died overnight. And I don't think that should be revived because I believe that was a small iteration of what's to come into the future of what's going to be, NFTs and blockchain.
Yeah. I mean, those crazy days of just like, you know, quick like whitelist, then mint outs, then the floor price just going like through the moon. Those days, I mean, that whole kind of fast money game, I feel like is like gone to the wayside, and I think it might be a good thing. for, like you said, like communities, like long-term establishing online, you know. So I think that's yeah, I think it's good. NFTs are not dead, but maybe the NFT, that crazy madness is gone for now anyway. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I assume there's gonna be some of that, but I don't think
Mm,
the same heights in terms of like 100
mm,
ETH floors, you know what I mean? I think
yeah,
those have to come down to more about rarity and very specific specialized communities that drive that value and not necessarily just because, you know, of the hype or sensation of other things. I think the
yeah,
level of speculation will kind of normalize in terms of
yeah.
Mhm.
people's expectations.
And I think a whole bunch of like people now can see like roadmaps unrealized, roadmaps realized over longer periods of time. And I think people have like more realistic expectations of you know what people are building, and they understand the technology a little bit more. Maybe not. Maybe the people that are in do. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, you mentioned like several things that I do want to get into in more detail, like digital identity and community and all this. But just a quick question. So you talked about hybrid NFTs. Are Killer Bears a hybrid NFT? Are those one such project that you kind of spoke to?
So
Or
I'm trying not to spill too much alpha because if this goes out, I need to be
give
in the
us the
safe.
alpha. We need the alpha.
Mm. We'll cut it out later.
So what's really okay? You guys are killing me. I love it. Um, yes, they will be given the nature of the trailers that are coming out on the social media. So what's interesting is I actually got a little bit of hand in this in terms of putting together the two teams that would make this happen. Obviously, Killer Bears and the team that builds out 404s or hybrid NFTs, and it's super cool because you know sometimes like when I was a kid, I was like, how do I leave legacy? How do I leave impact? And for like decades, I was just like trifling through and just kind of making my way. And it's crazy because I've been a part of a lot of startups, and I can say that I was there, but I definitely couldn't say I empowered or I enabled something. And then in this instance, a really great way. And so in this case, I was able to actually put the two teams together to create the opportunity for what will be a hybrid or a 404 NFT. Now, what I will tell you is that what's been speculated, because I won't go into all the details of what I think is going to happen.
Mm,
Although, if you want to ask me some follow-up questions, I may or may not answer them. But
mm,
what's cool is Killer Bears is actually an entertainment brand. So it started as a
mm,
PFP, but really was also done in a way that was designed to be part of a game. Now, I will tell you, right, when we talked about 21, 22, the other thing in addition to PFPs that was really speculated and really driven in terms of like a lot of liquidity was metaverses.
mm,
So this was one of those common themes, like, hey, how do you add your PFP into a metaverse? And so I think that was one of the original ideas that Killer Bears had, but then had to obviously pause as you saw the market shift from 22 to like later in the year, and then like all the metaverses all of a sudden just stopped and seized. Um, that being equal, though, Ben, one of the co-founders of Killer Bears, is actually under Umbrella Games, and so he actually had a successful exit or entry and exit for mobile gaming.
mm,
And what he wanted to do was bring the Killer Bears into the games. And so one of the things they did in terms of activations and collaborations, I actually partner with Soul Saga, right? So that's the Solana mobile phone. And what
mm,
was teased, because it hasn't been released yet, because the Soul 2 hasn't been released as well, is that we're actually going to be integrated as part of the ecosystem of games that they're going to be having. And the reason why that's really unique and successful, in my opinion at least, will be successful is because it's like, how do you get into the hands of mobile crypto users? Well, you buy the
mm,
phone and it's already ingrained into like the DNA, right? So
mm,
it's like a great way of getting your games into the hands of your audience right off the bat. And so what's been teased is that they're going to utilize hybrid NFTs to kind of release this mechanism, release the opportunities and things that go into it to really push forward the landscape and space and opportunity that they had before. So what I will tell you in terms of what kind of helps formulate this is they did do an open edition that they utilize as a burn so that you can actually create traits for not their second generation or third generation, depending on how you look at it. PFPs are what they call killer cubs. So that was a really unique entertainment platform for you to actually design utilizing basic traits, and then based off of burning your open edition NFTs, you could actually get unique things that were actually very mimetic in terms of culture, like Pepe, like mall glasses, like whatever was really hot at the time was actually utilized so that you can actually dress your cubs up in a way that was both unique and cultural at the time. So that's a really great collection that they have. And yes, they absolutely will have hybrid NFTs and killer bears based off of what I know.
Yeah. Okay. We don't want you getting in trouble, so don't spill it if you get in trouble. And also, like, I noticed, like, going through kind of some of the things that you've been working on, there's also some new use cases kind of coming in for NFTs, not just trading, not just secondaries, not just royalties, but like programmable IP, permissionless IP. Like, some of these terms are being thrown around now, like co-creating, IP together. And I guess Andrew and I were talking about it, and we just kind of wanted to know, like, generally, like, just for people who don't understand, like, for like the base level, like, what does it mean, like, generally?
So people have been actually doing this for a long time, right? So like there are actual meme generators that people utilize, whether that's like the
Mm,
Drake one where he's like gets that one look and then the smile, or it's like
mm,
the Spider-Man that are like shooting, at each other,
mm,
like, oh, which Spider-Man are you? Or like the one with the guy and his girl, and then he looks back, right? And then
mm,
people utilize this and they fill in the
meme.
text. So this is
Mm,
already like a derivative of the original, right?
mm,
And mimetic culture is something that is not only popular, obviously, to Web3 and Pepe and Moo and Moo Dang of recent, but it's also part of just Gen Z and Gen Alpha culture. So what I jokingly tell people, like, have you guys started thinking and realize like where all these things come from, like Riz and like all this like I would say like subculture. And I was thinking like, oh, this is totally like Web3. And then I was like talking to these 12-year-olds and they were using the same things. And I was like, they're definitely not in Web3. They're not talking about NFTs and it's the same language. And I was like, oh, I've been Gen Alpha. I've been totally okay because in reality, a lot of culture is about overlap and it's about like themes, and mimetic culture is a huge part of that. And so for me, programmable IP is a unique way of kind of utilizing blockchain the way it was always intended in terms of disrupting traditional ecosystems, right? So one thing that happened recently is like the California DMV actually put all of the California the cars in California registered on blockchain, so that way they can actually um, categorize and create a basic ledger of all the different people. And obviously, we know being part of Web3 and blockchain is like this is important because of provenance, understanding where it came from, how it is in terms of registrations, and then also be able to authenticate it as well as it being immutable, which means that you can't change it. So that's the same thing that when you look at IP, whether it's Pepe, right? Which not many people know is actually originally created by Matt Fury. And so when people utilize it, like everywhere you go, whether it's Discord, Giphy, even X and Instagram, like when they have these Pepe emojis, stickers, all these things, someone else has recreated it. It's not actually Matt Fury.
mm,
Um, him getting royalties and licensing from the people utilizing his property. But that's also because unfortunately it wasn't, created utilizing programmable IP. So what is programmable IP? It basically is having a form of automation that allows you to register your like IP via copyright, trademark, patents, all these things that will make it unique. And doing that on chain. And why this is important is because if you were to do this with, I think it's called W something IP, WOIP, I think might be the case, but feel free to fact check me later. Is it takes 3 to 5 years. And even if you have the best lawyer, it takes you 1 year. But now you
mm,
can do all of that utilizing a platform and just saying click register and boom, it's automatically updated. It's got, you answer all the forms and all the different questions and the survey to make sure that you give enough information for them to actually process it and register it. And they actually utilize it in story protocol at the US level. So that would be ideally uniform across the board, or at least a higher standard than what the base standard is. And so
Mm,
doing all this on chain allows people to be like, okay, now when it comes to provenance, boom, you just go to the blockchain. You just identify, based off of when it was registered, whether or not it's valid. Now, obviously, they have to cross check all of these things and say, hey, validate, invalidate. Someone else has done this prior before, but because of the blockchain, this naturally disrupts the existing ecosystem because it's all been centralized before. In a decentralized
mm,
system, anyone can just look it up. You just need a query and just find what this stuff means to you. And then all of a sudden, boom, you now just changed an entire industry overnight. And this includes entertainment. This includes like music and culture and art and just so many pieces of IP that people are doing. And to your point too, and maybe we can step back a bit, but co-creation is also another big thing.
mm.
And it's something that's super interesting that I think I'd love to get into a little bit more. But again, I'll pause just because I feel like maybe I should
Yeah.
break this up a little bit so it's a little more digestible.
I I just want to like kind of like maybe box that up and just say like, okay, so say I have this moment and I come up with this great meme and I somehow register it through one of these platforms, right? Only when social media turns Web3, it's like that's when it's going to be able to track and maybe pay me royalties down the track for when someone uses a derivative of my works down the track, right? But this is kind of like building the foundations now, like story
Correct.
protocols, pill, and their templates and things like that. Yeah, is
Yeah.
that what it is? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I think
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I
pretty much
think
nailed it.
it's
I love it.
yeah, it's exciting, but it's like so early stage, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I
I
think it's
think
only because I'm so into it. You know what I mean? That I'm just like, it's
mm,
now. But reality is no.
yeah.
We still have a way to go for sure.
Yeah.
No, but that's awesome to be there now. This is the foundation, right?
Yeah, and
So
I was gonna ask, like, who do you think should be exploring this programmable IP now? Like, should all creators be looking to this as a way to potentially position themselves in this future that we're talking about? Like, who should look into this now?
The short answer is everyone. But in terms of like use cases, for sure, artists, even like people who have their own personal brand or their actual content creators. Because to me, why not just register everything? It's not as if you're limited, right? And it makes sense to me that if you do it and it ever hits, you don't ever have to worry about looking over your shoulder. This is one of those
mm,
things that really is a move forward situation where creating things should be a form of documentation and not just like creativity. And I say that only because you can document your creativity and it now twofolds as both content as well as like um a record, right? Of how you got there. People love origin stories. People love stories and narratives, and I feel like that's a huge part of it. Just to give you guys an idea of who we're targeting as part of Mycelium and Story Protocol is actually on the easy like low hanging fruit. It's actually communities, right?
mm,
If you buy an NFT, most of the times, unless it's CC0, which just means that it doesn't have ownership of the IP. Usually has some form of IP, right? So my Killer Bear, I can technically utilize, and I have. So I've created derivatives with other communities and other projects where they've taken my pink Killer Bear and either like made a hoodie out of it or they remixed it and changed the format so it fits that given style. So it's the same thing
mm,
like you've ever been on South Park or been on Simpsons, right? They go into these other worlds and all of a sudden they've been reformatted to fit that
mm,
one existing metaverse or universe, but they still keep the core characteristics of who they are so that they're still recognizable, right? And so when you look at those opportunities of people who are like, hey, this is my digital identity, this is my personal brand, or they commingle them, right? Where it's like, hey, this is my digital identity, it's not sitting on my shoulder or sitting on my head. And then like you put that on chain, and all of a sudden now your IP, if anyone ever uses it from those two pieces, whether it's your personal brand or whether it's your digital assets that you have that you've kind of utilized as your identity, is now recorded and now it's on chain and now you can keep creating with it so that someone else can't come in and be like, well, I'm Shaolin and no, you're Shaolin, or no, who's this?
mm,
And this is very distinctive. I do think this is important too because as we start looking at brands that are utilizing creator content and doing co-creation, to your point, Cody, is like Nike. If you go into their app, it's like, hey, what brand is, or like what shoe is going on, and usually it's either like a cultural icon, it's a athlete, usually, and then it's like, hey, this is what they wear, and so they show you their clothes, the items, what they wear, the color schemes, right? I can't think of the word, but like a style guide, right? Like you see a kind of a
Mm,
style guide of each one of these personas, and then combining that with like a Nike, an Adidas, a Puma, any of these fashion brands, it really shows you like where you go and where you can go when you utilize products and people's persona in a way that like scales, right? And so
mm,
that's the kind of cool part that I think is there. So for us, whether it's at an NFT community or again, whether it's some of these co-creators who are again artists and athletes and people who are doing these things, it's hard for me to be like so specific when reality everyone can benefit because personal brand is a big part of like how I came up in the past year. Like before that,
mm,
for 2.5 years, 3 years, people didn't really know who I was unless you specifically talked to me or you worked with the communities I was with. But now that I've built my own personal brand, now I can
mm,
kind of go in and out of any community and know that what I do, how I do it is being recognized and people have like they can put a finger on it.
mm,
Yeah, I want to explore this aspect of personal branding too. It's also something we wanted to talk about. Before we jump into that though, like this co-creation, like I mean, as a creator, it's super clear, you know, being able to the provenance of any IP and being able to very easily track that back and see where pieces remixed content is coming from, where this user generated content is coming from. I mean, your example of Matt Fury is like perfect because, you know, arguably the largest meme ever, Pepe, but most people don't know who created it. But if it was very easy to track that back, then you know, not only would that lead to a whole bunch more revenue opportunity for Matt Fury, who created this like cultural icon, but also just like it informs the general public in a way that currently is difficult to achieve unless you are proactive to find who
So I
Matt
do want to
Fury is.
add, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
interrupting you.
please,
So
please.
that's the other beautiful thing, right? I didn't even cover it, is IP graph, right? So that's the fancy word for saying like a social graph. So you can actually see the genealogy. Hey, like Cody created this, Andrew created that. And then when you see the remixes and derivatives that come from it, like, hey, I'm inspired by this. So I take your IP, I remix it utilizing a platform or a tool, and then I create, and then now it says Andrew and Shaolin. And then like
mm,
someone then copies that, right? Because one of these things is going to hit, but let's say it hits 10 um, touch points later, right? Like it took the 10th person for that to become super viral. And now it's like, who was the, the owner or the creator who created this original idea? And now you can say, oh, now it's Andrew. And so you can actually see that kind of Kevin Bacon feel like of all these different touch points and touching them and seeing how far they've gone and how they've kind of, again, utilized this form of
mm,
co-creation is all done on the blockchain. And I think that part is probably the most unique factor to this level of IP and how to actually use it. Because what you could do is actually not only understand the origin, but you could actually pick things that are the most popular and then pick the little pieces and maybe even take those 10 pieces, like I said, touch points, and then basically take all of them and make their own version of it, right? So like
mm,
taking the top 10 things that you think each one of them and why they were important, and then kind of making your own 11th touch point. And so I think
mm.
that's the level of kind of co-creation that's very unique to something like programmable IP.
It'd work well for music, wouldn't it, Andrew?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
Andrew's a muso, so
You,
I
that
think
was the
that'd
other
be cool.
topic. 100%. You're you're
Mm,
you're you're reading the inside of my mind, but only because I've been sleeping in this for like the
mm.
past 2 months.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. For music, it's huge. You start to get into audio samples. You know, I have a drum, a kick drum, and a snare drum that everyone loves using. And you
Mm,
know, there's all these audio samples that are being circulated, and it's you know the provenance, the origin of these people don't know. But this would solve something like that, and being able to just build on top of other people's samples and pieces of music, and just the remix culture with audio is obviously massive. So yeah, I
it
see that
sounds
for sure.
like Story Protocol is building something pretty powerful and pretty useful. I was talking to some crypto guys the other day, like predominantly crypto guys, not I don't know, Web3 internet, like Web3 community cultural guys. Do you know what I mean? Like there is a
I know what
difference.
you mean, but
There is
it's
a
you
difference.
have to have these conversations, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like because there are all these like sub communities, subcategories within what we're doing, even though it's so niche and so small.
And this guy's like, "What the fuck is Story Protocol? This thing, another L1? Oh my god!" And he was going on, and I was like, "Yeah, but there's a lot of big names. They raise a lot. And I do think this IP thing, like, it's just, it's like a new problem. And it's a new problem that hasn't been unlocked yet. Like, there's lots of people trying and working on stuff, but it hasn't really been unlocked. And I think a lot of people in crypto, like traditional crypto, uh, what does that even mean?
Sounds so
But
posh now.
yeah, what does that mean? And they're like, they just look at it as another L1 trying to do something. But I do think that there is something really powerful here that does, like, once it gets kind of like unlocked, and it looks like it's moving a little bit more than it was a year ago,
It's
2 years
and
ago.
it's yeah,
Yeah,
and it's still early. It's still early. We're still
yeah,
going through
big
alpha
time.
and betas and yeah, iterations of
Mhm.
test net before we go to mainnet. And I believe
Yeah.
that has a larger impact. Can I introduce something though in terms of ideas so that like I believe help really revolutionize and evolve my thought of how change should be operating? If you look at them as publishers and if you look them
Mm,
as a co-creator in terms of marketing and amplification, then how you look at change actually changes dramatically because we're so used to it because of the technical details of thinking of it from a technical level, right? Throughput, security, layers, like how like people do things. Is it gasless? All this stuff. But the reality is it's all the same, right? To your point. When you talk to crypto bros and they're like, no, man, another L2, another L1, another L3, like this is insane. What are we coming down to? But if you think about like, if you as a publisher that is very specific to a niche, or in this case, like IP, and this is all they do and all they focus on, why would you want to go anywhere else when it comes to a chain? Because that means you're just either trying to duplicate and create redundancy, or there's a limitation to what's being done. And in that regards, then there's a different use case. But like when it comes to like abstract, when it comes to some of these things, you see like whether it's consumer crypto, quote unquote, excuse me, or if it's like gaming, then this is
mm,
important because then you understand them as a publisher to help identify what you're trying to build and how they can make you better. Because in the end, the chain is only valuable as the people consuming it and the products and in this case applications are being built. And without those things, the chain
mm.
is essentially useless because if there's
So do
no
you
people
think,
using it, then it just
so
changes the whole
should
dynamic.
there be cross chain then, or no? Cross chain shouldn't be a thing. It
Well,
should
okay,
be
so
a bit more
so so
scaled.
this is a great question. The answer is absolutely. There
Yeah.
needs to be interoperability because the reality is not just IP, right? Like being on one chain, but it's the
Mm,
fact that like every major brand or every major product, if you're talking about ecosystems, has a certain amount of throughput. And in the end, you want to be able to own and control it. If you're having, like a ghost kitchen, right? If there's 20 other chefs cooking, but you need
mm,
to use the main fire, or you've scaled where you need to create more than like just that one kitchen, then you've outgrown it. And so you're going to create your own L1, you're going to create your own L2, because in the end, you need to be able to satisfy your consumers and make sure that their transactions are being prioritized. Without it,
mm.
then you're just
Solana.
circumstanced to like
Mm,
Solana,
yeah.
Ethereum, right? Like in terms of L1, and then
Mm,
even like Bitcoin, right? All this inscriptions, like you are like they have all the control in terms of how you manage the end consumer's experience. And in that case, you have to create these other L2s, other L1s to kind of
mm,
give them the proper experience so that they're not going elsewhere. Right. You
yeah.
don't want that limitation in terms of like, again, we talk about Web2 and like e-commerce. If your e-commerce store is too slow, you're going to find someone else who has a similar product. And so it's the
Mm.
same thought process.
So
So
you
you
see,
this sorry, Andrew, you go.
I was just gonna ask, so you see a future where, once we get to this place where blockchain is, widely utilized, everyone's on chain, we're in this Web3 internet, like all of these major brands and corporations who are significant enough in size and customer base are gonna have their own L1s, L2s potentially.
Absolutely. The main reason why is because people have created like in the box solutions, right? The same way they did it for like Shopify. You're going to see these brands that have created how to build your own blockchain. Technically, they exist today. the devs have created these things, and it's just plugging in the different factors in terms of the technical requirement that you want to be on chain, how you want
Mm.
it to like devise it, and then more importantly, how do you want to build upon it? So you're going to have all these like wireframes of like how to build your chain, and then you're just going to say, hey, what are my use cases? Let me build it out for these things. And then so like why you see gaming utilize AVAX and Arbitrum is they have subnets or what they call their own version of L1, right? So because like something like off the grid, you want to be able to control all of your traffic. You want to be able to control all the users. You want to be able to remove and clean out bots and symbols and like like people that you feel are um, utilizing too much of your bandwidth and not actually contributing anything, right? Because in the
Mm.
end of the day, you want to make sure everyone who's part of it is having a amazing experience and that you have the ability to turn it up or turn it down depending on need.
So for some of the new ones, right? So story, would you say that's like the IP chain? And then
Absolutely.
would you say that abstract is, I mean, consumer crypto, is that similar, or would you say that's more like bridging online offline?
So I do think that those are two different concepts, right? It really comes down
Yeah.
to, again, what your use cases are and who your consumers of that given chain are. So to be fair, I try to be as neutral and unbiased as possible because I believe information needs to start being elevated in terms of removing bias and providing people use case and value based off of face value, and then some level of subject matter expert coming in and saying, hey, given that these are the things, this is the best use case. When it comes to consumer crypto, I actually believe there's three chains that are currently in place. One, Ape Chain, which hasn't launched yet.
Hmm.
Abstract, which is definitely probably one of the most popular given Cigar and the dev team that are behind it, in addition to being backed by and owned by Igloo, right, which is Pudgy Penguins. And then even like Coinbase's Base, right? The fact
Okay.
that you can utilize their Coinbase wallet as a smart wallet because you can just log
Hmm.
in using your Gmail or using your
Hmm.
Apple automatically puts you into their ecosystem, utilizing their wallet, and then you can just go ahead and buy things. I do think it's more Web3 native per se, but I do think it's that same idea of having a one application to kind of rule them all, which is like when you listen to Luca, when you listen to the people at Ape Chain and ApeCoin DAO, this is what they're envisioning, like onboarding and on-ramping users to be. And I feel like we're going to see quite a few of them. And it's going to be more of the fact of like, one, when they deliver in terms of timing, first movers advantage, and then also how they retain them. Because I think one of the biggest difficulties when I talk about blockchain is that people are so busy focused on user acquisition and transaction, and they're not focusing on what I like to call community experience in terms
Mm.
of giving them such an emotional experience, something that gives them something in the heart and something in the soul that says, hey, I will never forget this, and it'll be embedded and imprinted on me in a way that will change my life forever. And a lot of us probably have those ideas of what that means for you. If I go, hey, what was that one moment when you're like, aha, Web3? What was that blockchain moment, right? Was it like your Basie? Was it your CryptoPunk? Or was it something even worse, like the first time you got rugged? You know what I mean? So there's all these different touch points that people utilize. And see, both of you like smiled and you remember something, right? That like just lit you up. And those experiences, if you can do that for consumer crypto, right, will actually change and benefit people to the same way people have analogies for like the first time on Meta, the first time on Google, the first time they bought something on Amazon, right? So
Mm.
creating these memorable and experiences that touch people in terms of emotional experiences really is important to drive retention. I think that's the next wave of evolution of like Meta that people are going to start pushing on.
Who do you think is
Roguelike
like,
experiences.
yeah, roguelike experiences. Um, who do you see as kind of like a guiding light or inspiration in that regard right now, like projects or builders who are consistently striving for delivering those types of transformative aha moment experiences?
So it depends on how you look at it, but I mean, obviously, people will reference Pudgy Penguins, but I'll actually talk about a couple of different things. So in terms of like degen behavior, the OGs, obviously, in my opinion, are like DGods. DGods are a
Mm.
huge cultural component of the people. Remilio obviously kind of leans in the same way, and the other derivatives that come from that. For me personally, though, I love cute stuff. So like Claynosaurs, they're amazing. When I meet the
Mhm.
team, see how they're actually impacting entertainment because they were able to win the awards that they have. And I'm not going to show them too hard, but I just love Andrew and Nick. So I had a chance to get to know them not only through IP and Story Protocol, but I actually got to know them just doing spaces and like audio spaces, like similar we're doing now. And what I will tell you is, when you hear like their ideas and when you hear how they're kind of transforming IP in a way that's being utilized in a blockchain, having the super fans of Web3, as well as like disrupting places like entertainment, right? So when they won the Collision Award, DreamWorks, Pixar, Marvel, Disney, like they all came in and asked them, "What are you guys doing differently that we don't understand and we don't know?" Like, well, we're building in Web3, and a lot of that has come down to the level of engagement that they have that is not
Mm,
seen anywhere else, which is super communities, right? Super fans that are coming in and highly engaging in that content, reposting, liking, creating mimetic value, right, of that same IP and applying it to other things that are powerful in terms of how culture is seen. You know what I mean? And so it's just one of those things like them. Obviously, Killer Bears, they're my PFP. So I love that crew. Anyone that's actually taking the long term stance of like 5 to 10 years, I believe, is really driving value to onboarding as well as like creating, to answer your question, that will help kind of change the landscape of what's going on. And to be fair, hopefully, some of them I haven't named because they're being built today. And I believe anyone who has the persistence and the perseverance to be early, but also, stick to it, because I think it's so easy to walk away.
mm,
Those are the ones that are going to last. And the ones that I've named currently are the ones who have been doing it for years on end. And so you look at like Claynosaurs, they've been doing, what they've been doing in terms of IP and building, for over 10 years. Same thing with like Ben over at Killer Bears. He's been doing this for over 10 years. And, whether or not they utilize their original IP or they use the IP that they're building in Web3 is, to me, secondary.
mm,
And so like obviously what Luca's doing at Pudgy's is also amazing. But again, I have to give credit to everyone that's part of this ecosystem. I don't want to limit my answer because Frank, he's also innovative. And although
yeah,
it's a very hit or miss game, he's willing to try. And it's
yeah,
just unfortunately that this Web3 ecosystem is very unforgiving because it's usually matched to results, and that results is usually floor price. But I mean, that's just a moment. That's just a blip. If we look at over again, the lifetime that you've been in crypto, or you've been in crypto, Andrew, it's like if this is like 5 or 10 years, that's just one moment in time. It should be
mm,
that string of time that evolves and helps elevate and helps push the space forward. Because when we talk about the modern internet today and social media and e-commerce, like there have been a lot of mistakes along the way, but we learn from each other, we grow from each other, and we get better because we're willing to move past the mistakes and understand like the revolution that happened prior to is what is and how we are today.
mm. Hats off to anyone who just kept building the whole time too. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
and
what you're
that's
saying. It's
correct.
just like the whole time, like if you were just in the bear and still going and the communities were still active, I mean, it's pretty amazing. Like because that community, even in a very positive community, can turn,
Mhm.
so like, and to be able to power through that, it takes some special people. Um Andrew, I know we want to go into community, right, and talk about that a little bit more and building communities and your three pillars. But I want to ask just about gaming first.
Oh, please.
Yeah, because I think it's like one of these use cases for NFTs and for blockchains that is super fun, but it's kind of like again so early, So I don't know, Andrew, that cool with you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
okay, cool. So I know you're part of uh Pixie, Mixie,
See. Mhm.
Mixie, right? I also want to ask about Mixie, but I want to ask just like gaming and crypto. Um, what is some fun use case or something simple for people to understand? Like, how can crypto and gaming come together, like in a fun way, in a useful way?
Yeah, no, there's so many use cases actually. I just think a lot of people are so focused on farming, they're so focused on trying to make money from it that they kind of miss the forest from the trees, right? It
Mm,
really comes down to like simplicity, abstracting like what games are. And so for the most part, they're just game loops, right? And what game loops are is experiences that are repeated over time that have the structure and the wireframe to really understand what it is. So like Pac-Man, it's like eating pellets, collect your points, and avoid the ghost. And if you can get the big pellet, you could eat the ghost and get more points. And then when you complete them all, you start over again, right? So this is a
Mhm.
game loop. Um, what I like to think of gaming, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of other people keep liking to make it complicated, is if you think about it as a layer of an experience. So if this was Pac-Man, right? And they have that layer of experience of like pellets and ghosts, but then you add in another layer, which is like a second player. Now it's multiplayer. That's a second experience. And so what you're doing is you're ideally in crypto and blockchain in terms of game, you're just adding layers of experience that just creates this very familiar veil of something that if removed doesn't take away from the game, but it ideally enhances it, right? So if you've ever played like a MMORPG game like World of Warcraft, there's like crafting, right? If you look at like something like Diablo, where you have this dungeon games, but they have this charm system where like if you input different things in your inventory, it gives you certain benefits and certain rewards. So think about that in terms of like blockchain experience, right? So over at DLab Games, as well as Mixie, what people are trying to do is actually add a layer of experience that they're kind of either akin to or transformative, which is something they've never seen before, but adds value to the game and to the overall like ecosystem. Another use case of this would be like the ability, like in like GTA, to be able to go to your house and store all the guns and the cars and your houses and like just put it into a location and then like, hey, I built this thing. And now like not only did I like pillage and like do these crazy side quests, but then I was able to take ownership of it. So when you think of
Mm.
actual ownership, it usually ends up lying in that same ecosystem. I can't go outside of GTA and utilize those items, those skins, those weapons, those whatever digital class assets that they are. So what NFT does, it puts it on the blockchain and then it allows you to not only own it, but allows you to kind of flex it in a way that creates some form of like um, part of who you are, right? In terms of like
Mm.
the same thing, you have your hat, your watch, the hoodie that I'm wearing, my glasses. Like these are all things that are I identify with it because I chose to out of my own thing, whether they fell in my lap or whether I bought them. They're part of who I am and what you see in front of me. So that's what NFTs are, I think, in gaming. So like the biggest one obviously is the black market that's happening in like Counter-Strike Go, right? Like these skins, these guns, they are being traded for like six figures, even seven figures at a time because they're so unique, so rare. But again, if you apply that and you put that as an NFT, then you remove that part of the game and you actually give that ownership to the gamers. And so now they can take that and they can actually ideally interoperably put it into any and every game that they come with. Because if you're spending the money on something, you want to be able to know that you own it, right? This is a very simple idea that's kind of gone over from the metaverse time. But what I'll tell you is let's talk about like 2024. How do we utilize gaming in a unique way that adds experiences, right? So over at DLab Games, we have what we call our AIS, Asset Inventory System. And it's very similar to the charm system at Diablo because we have partners with Aether, we have partners with Azuki, partners with Catizen over at the Telegram and Ton ecosystem. These are all different chains. These are all different NFTs. They're all different use cases. One's infra, one's depends, one's gaming. And what we can do is you can actually plug in those NFTs into our ecosystem and you can actually utilize it to be part of a reward system. So this is a kind of cool, unique feature that hey, if I belong to multiple communities and I'm playing this game, I want to be able to bring those things in. Obviously, it'd be great if you could do skins and other items that would be bring in, but this is like a first use case system. The next one is, hey,
Mhm.
I love gambling, right? If let's say Andrew is amazing, like first person shooter, but like, let's say we play strategy games. And so we're not going to be like playing with Andrew and expecting like spend all this money and then to lose. Right. But what we could do instead is we can actually prop bet on Andrew saying, hey, he's going to be in a tournament. I'm going to put $10 that he's going to win it all. Right. So now
Mm.
you're adding that extra gaming experience on top of like, again, that first layer, that second
Mm.
layer of like ownership asset. And now you can actually do betting. And so
Mhm.
betting is an additional layer, right? So you can start seeing like as you look at blockchain, it just empowers both gaming studios as well as consumers and gamers to be able to participate at every different level. So let's say I was a speculator and I wanted to do like prop betting on terms of like an entire season of multiple players. Now I just removed it and now I just became like an entire gambling part of it, right? Or let's
Mm.
say, like there's content creators and they're building and I want to be able to support them. So now I can tip them and now they can give me tokens or like soulbound tokens that I'm a participant of what they're building. And every time they build something or they're on a show, you get notified. But on top of that, you get your participation in terms of like ownership and equity potentially, right? Again, I have to be very careful with these words because based out here in the United States, we don't want to confuse anything in terms of financial advice and or securities. But to my point, is there's again what you're really doing is you're abstracting each individual layer that people love and are a part of and then just adding it so that at some point in time it becomes a larger mecca or mega ecosystem where you can get to a ready player one because now instead of focusing on one aspect and one things they become interoperable where you're not you're choosing not to distinguish everything that happens and they're all just kind of plugged into each other. I believe blockchain empowers that, enables that, and gives you that hope of future of how you can do this without having to worry about walled gardens of an Apple, a Google, an Amazon, or Facebook, right? So all of these things are usually they'll never combine because for them, because it's centralized and because there's shareholders, their board of directors, like they'll never ever cooperate. But I do think when you look at decentralization, that's when the opportunities to come in and empower people to actually work together in a way that makes sense because they fractionalize everything, right? In the end, fractionalization is how everything's able to participate in a way that everybody benefits.
And do you think that some of these large gaming studios like Epic or like who has GTA, do you think that they
Rockstar.
will yeah, do you think that they will actually want, you know, their items turned into assets? Because this is a question that came up for me, and I was thinking about because I love the idea. I love the idea of interoperability between some games. Certain games might not do it. You don't want to bring a sword into a futuristic space shooter, and
No,
there's ways to get around that. Obviously, I mean maybe, but
no, yeah, 100% you can. You can create themes and then you can make sure that things fit those guidelines.
yeah, yeah. And I thought about that, and then I thought, but maybe these gaming studios don't want to turn like an expense for a gamer into like this tradable asset. I mean, unless the market is so big once there's secondaries that they make more money opening it up, you know?
We're gonna have to
Like,
find out, right? That's the beauty
yeah,
of
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
time is going to tell us and dictate to us how that works out. What I will tell you though is every single one of them, Electronic Arts, Rockstar, Activision, right? They all have actually arms in blockchain because you can look
Mm-hmm.
at patents that are being filed. You can see the things that they're doing. The same thing with banks, the same thing with credit cards and all these different companies. Everyone's wanting a piece of the pie. But what they're not doing is showing their hand because once
Yeah.
they do, everything changes. And the second thing is it's also stigmatism, right? It's like, not, excuse me. I think that's an inappropriate word. It's the stigma of the situation where if you are a first mover and you fail, then what happens next, right? So you've actually seen a lot of fashion brands do this with NFTs. You've
Mm,
seen actually car companies do this with NFTs, and
they shot
they
their shot too early. Yeah.
exactly. And so,
Interesting.
when it comes to games, I think you're going to start seeing it, but they want to let everyone else pay all the money ahead of time. And then they're going to be able to integrate their IPs and their brands and do these things at scale and just drop it in. And everybody's like, oh, okay, great. Now they've joined it. Why didn't they do
Mm,
this earlier? But the reality is once you own so much market share, why would you want to give that up voluntarily? And so it's just going
mm,
to, again, to the point that you guys agreed upon, which is it's just going to take time. This is not going anywhere. This is not a fad. It's just
no.
which iteration it's going to stick. It's like
Yeah.
everything else in life. You just got to keep playing around, finding out, and then at some point in time, something makes sense, and then it just proliferates. It just grows. It just becomes viral and
Mm.
just takes over.
I think the penny dropped for the gaming with me when I was thinking about it deeply, and I had this idea that if I could program a boss somehow in some game, and like my boss then was playing in the game and people could challenge it, and then so I've actually programmed a piece, an element that goes into the game. And then when I kind of like realized like that's how many layers there could be, that all the elements could be programmed by the different users and games could kind of come in together, kind of like a Ready Player One in the future type thing. I realized like to get there, we have to start, down
Mhm.
here.
But to be fair, like that's what Nifty Island is. You can create your own little mini games and have like your Mario Party of your community playing your game that you created yourself. It's all user generated backgrounds and like environments that you help facilitate. And it's one of those things that they've actually brought in other communities so that they can help facilitate these things. And it's a great game one to environment because it's very collaborative. It's designed to
Mm,
not only again focus on creators like yourself who want to create this boss and then plug that in, but it's also like at every level, right? It's just someone who just wants to come in every day and just have a social get together and then utilize
mm,
games as that kind of focal centerpiece of like creating conversations. Right? The same thing with like poker and like so many other these games that have been um digitally transformed in onto the blockchain, right? So there's
mm.
just lots of different levers and different things that people are doing, but 100%, it's actually happening. And so that's the beauty of having things over time, because this is something that when you looked at 3-4 years ago was an impossibility, but now it's actually happening in real time.
Do you think we're going to go further into the metaverse, or do you think we're going to go AR glasses and bring some of that out into the world?
I think both. I mean, obviously, Meta had a dream that it was going to happen sooner than later, and they had to pull out, right? I've actually experienced the Apple Pro Vision, and I will say this transformative, because the reality is I'm looking at one monitor, another monitor, and then another, because I have a 3 monitor setup. And all you have to do in an Apple Pro Vision is just basically widen your image, so you're pushing it back further out, and it's just like like going to what do they call them? Like when you used to drive your cars into a movie and then have multiple screens, and then
Driving.
that's what you do. You just the drive-in, right? And then you just have these different screens, and you can control all of them, and you're only limited by your brain. And
Mm,
because the digital landscape of just turning your head allows you to like have all that. And if you wanted to turn 360, you could have that many screens for you to manipulate and play with and engage with. And so to answer your question, both. But I
right.
think which one we'll take first, probably metaverse, because of the technology of AR is very limited right now. It's getting
Mm,
better. I think probably another 5 to 10 years. And maybe something technological transforms that and expedites it. So it happens in 2 to 3 years. But I've already seen the metaverses. I've participated in 2D and 3D versions of it. And just when people decide to just participate in that system and that ecosystem, it just goes back to like the old days of Discord voice chats, right? There was no metaverse, but everybody could just have an amazing time being at one place, one time, having that kind of party at environment where if someone did want to put a game on and you did play, it just became that much better. So I'm for all of those things, but the reality is it's more the social component to me that's going to be the kicker than it is like the technology itself. I think we focus too much on the technology and not the actual user experience.
mm.
Um, I want to be conscious of your time, but something I did really want to jump into is
Oh,
like
wow.
is community in Web3. I mean, you're very active. You've talked about, community throughout this conversation in a few different contexts. And um, I would just love to hear maybe some, Web3 is just, there's a massive focus on community. I would say more so than other industries, um, even. And I'm just curious, kind of some stories and you lessons you've learned over the last several years working in Web3 with different communities. Like, what are some secrets you can share with people about like growing a community and where to apply your focus and experiences to provide just any lessons, horror stories that you could share would be amazing.
So I guess the horror story is the one that we all experienced, which was the pandemic. That did is it created isolation and understanding the impact of what community has. We're not able to actually look at your neighbor and go outside and interact and engage with them because of the fear of getting ill or sick. Really helped transform very tangibly, right? Very very viscerally. Like you could feel, and you could probably remember that time you're like, oh, I can't go outside, I can't engage, I have to have 10 feet of distance or whatever it was. And then it's like, okay, so while we're doing all of that, let's learn about other things. And obviously, from that came Web3, came crypto, and came NFT communities. And so what that did is it basically, in my opinion, in terms of like hacks, like these are one of the things that you can't control, you can't foretell because of something like a pandemic. But what it can do is show you and reveal to you the importance of connectivity. That's what community is to me. It's about networking and connecting with others, whether it's through animal pictures, whether it's through common interests like parenting, sports, cars, something that feels very native to you based off of your personal experiences, probably growing up with your parents, your cousins, your family, or your adopted family, right? And so all of these things in terms of connectivity really does change when you look at how social media impacts you because of the ability to see things, experience things um, globally, right? You're not limited by what's in front of you. You're not limited by your time zones, and that came super apparent post pandemic. And I think that's why like the wave of super fans and community hit because prior to that, right? If you think about it, crypto was just like anything else in our world, in our lives, because no one talked about super fans the way they do now, outside of like cosplay, out of like Magic the Gathering, some of these things that kind of help transform the way a mass amount of people like touched each other's lives in terms of like familiarity and things that regardless of background, culture, socioeconomic status, change. So without getting too kind of philosophical, kind of moving that into now, it's like that's what Web3 is relatively synonymous for in terms of impact with NFTs. As you start looking at the crypto punks, the bored apes, and all these other like super communities, what you notice is that as they're super engaged into how they interact with each other, we utilize platforms like Discord. We use platforms like Telegram and uh, Twitter, now known as X. It's one of those things that really helps kind of transform like what the expectations of what community can be. And although again, we do these things through Reddit, I have to give a lot of credit to the platforms and technology before us, right? Facebook groups. But you add that little layer of scarcity, right? That comes with NFTs. You really do and empower people in ways that you otherwise wouldn't have, right? When I look at communities like Azuki, Bored Apes, like you see this group of sub community of people who really love what they do and the people who just support that brand. And then when it comes down to it, like I think you guys kind of alluded to, and I appreciate you guys doing your due diligence. For me, it's really understanding and leaning and tapping into that. But more importantly, it's like, how do we identify these things in a meaningful way that has impact, right? So for me, obviously, it's going to be culture. Culture is paramount to everything else. What that means is basically your mission statement. What is it that your community stands for? What do they want to stand on? When it comes down to when people ask them why this, the answer is that. And then they hopefully have a couple of bullet points that defines who they are, what they are, and that becomes the culture, right? Now, what makes that actually sustainable though is actual what we talked about before, which is customer experience, right? Not customer, I'm sorry, community experience. I equate it to, because I've always been in account management and client services. So I have over 15 years of like understanding this both from a technical space as well as a hospitality space. One of my favorite things is food and like hotels, because when you go and do these things, you can find them to be very transformative. They even have the thing called the Michelin Guide, right? And so based off of their unique experiences, is this something worthy of going to, traveling to, flying across the world to experience? And based off of those things, they've given 1, 2, 3 stars. And all that boils down to is how transformative is that experience. And so if you're able to provide a unique experience to your community, that's when you start seeing ambassadors. That's when you start seeing advocates, people who become part of your ecosystem that not only embody what you're doing, but are able to communicate and actually stand on what you've built. And so those 3 layers of community, which again, just to reemphasize, culture, community experience, and advocacy, are the things that I believe every community needs and is required, because without it, the same way people come into crypto because it's financially incentivized, they're just as quickly as to go if the money isn't there. And so community can't be focused on financial incentivization. It can't be focused on like, oh, what your floor price is. Or more importantly, it can't be focused like, okay, I did something and I got it out of it, but now I can go get that elsewhere. You need to find something that's renewable. You need to find something that's sustainable. So you have to find something that people can't replicate. And that's because you can't replicate relationships. You can't replicate connecting to other people's over things and over experiences. So for me, if you're going to have a community, and as much as I love how anonymous and people are undocs in the space, IRL events are the ways to really transform. It's the way how I met Andrew. It's the way that I hope to meet you in the future, Cody. It's if you're able to actually meet people in person, you really can then synthesize this experience digitally into an analog experience of getting to be across from someone, breaking bread, having a meal, playing games, hanging out at a bar, anything and everything that basically connects people to each other in a way that like I like to always think of this as almost like neurochemical, like something that sets off in your brain where you have a certain frequency that you can then embed upon another. And then that person, you will always remember them and some facet. And then that's how you kind of like come back to at the end of the day, like, hey, what was that experience I had with them? And then you remember that moment and that conversation, and you're like, boom, there it was. And then you're like, okay, and now how do we replicate that? How do we keep repeating that? How can we do that in a way that like transform and changes people's lives? And community is 100% that. That's the case of everything that I see, whether again, it's, the 4-H club, like, sorry, that's a very American reference. Whether that's sports or whether that's, anything else in life, it's about having common ground and being able to be able to relate to someone else.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective, and I
It
very
is, right?
well-rounded,
Mm.
well-rounded advice on that. Um, how do you like something we saw also when reviewing, kind of taking a look at some stuff you're working on? You kind of have your Web3 pillars: elevate, amplify, connect. How do you see those things kind of playing into this? Is it similar? It's aligned? What can you speak to those pillars a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I created these pillars because I didn't have a personal brand when I got into Web3. And in 2023, after Art Basel, after an IRL event, I was talking to a close friend of mine. She meant the world to me, but it was one of those things that like really slapped me in the face, if that makes sense. Like if you have really good friends, it shouldn't only be in the good times. It should also be in the moments where like you need a little bit of course correction. And she's like, "What are you doing in this space if you're not creating your own personal brand where you're not being able to be recognized? If you're using like me or you're using our friendship and that's like the cornerstone of how you get to meet other people, then how are you going to do that without me?" Now, that wasn't 100% true, but it was true enough for me to have to think about things very quickly and very hard. I had to reevaluate what I was doing in Web3 and realize that I had to take a step forward and come into the light, go in and be a real content creator, um, create content that was relevant, create content that resonated with me and that embodied kind of what I bring to the table. So I actually created these 3 pillars. I asked myself, what is it about the space that if I could change and create that would actually elevate the space and leave it better than when I started? And that had to do with these 3 pillars because in the end, so much of what I saw was just, again, mimetic value, but like it wasn't being done in a way that was elevating the space. And so that was my first pillar, right? Um, Elevating means where you actually take the information you're getting and you embody it, you personalize it, and you make it your own. You're not
Mm.
copying pasta. You're not doing something else and just repeating it. What you're doing instead is you're personalizing and you're becoming your authentic, genuine self. And by doing so, it helps elevate you, but more importantly, it helps elevate the things around you. Because if I decide to have very unique takes or spicy takes, as the people in Web3 like to do, then I can start creating an identity. And then from there, like, okay, so if this is the case and now I'm me, but like I'm doing these things, how do I make the people around me better? This doesn't really work, right? It's a very individual, very selfish thing. So I was thinking, okay, let me amplify. So what does that mean? Amplify is actually when you take other people, the things that resonate, the things that you believe in, and instead of saying, hey, me, which I believe sometimes in this space, it's all about me, right? It's about my vanity metrics. It's about how many likes, reposts, impressions, all these things that like X is known for, right? In terms of driving like perceived value and removing them and saying, no, you know what I want to do instead? I want to support other people. So if I'm seeing Cody or if I'm seeing Andrew and I'm seeing your guys's timeline on Twitter, I want to be able to say, hey, he says something really amazing. Instead of like reposting it and just walking away, repost it, like it, do all the things that will help amplify and give them the amount of impressions, give them the credit. Because I think one of the things that's super missing in this space is actually empowering and showing other people of not only giving them value, but actually showing them that these are the people that have impacted you, right? It's a very common thing when you look at just normal society, right? Like being Asian in America, like I have a lot of theology that comes from uh, Confucianism, Buddhism, and I don't remember the last of Taoism. And all those things have taught me to like, in order to be part of something, you have to be part of community. And in order to do that, you have to embody other people and other things. So for me, amplifying is that, right? It's like, hey, if I believe in something, don't just do what I say, but do what other people are doing. And so that's how I've been able to do the next thing, which is connect. When you amplify others, it actually comes back to you. It's a very karmic thing. It's a very energetic thing where if you create that resonance and you amplify and you push to others, it comes back to you because then now all of a sudden people are responding back to you. You can DM them and ask them questions, and you can actually engage with them that they then now support you. So it's kind of one of those things of reciprocation. Now, I say that openly, but understand that if you do it inauthentically, if you do it just for that layer of engagement, understand that people do read that as well. And so you do need to do it in a way that's sustainable, in the way that makes sense, because the people that you reach out to and you amplify may not receive and do that in turn and may not be sustainable. So make sure if you do these things, do it to the people that you care for and care about, because if you put it in all the wrong places, you may actually be worse off than you started. So make sure that if you believe in these pillars, do them in a way that resonates to you. And then the last one is what I was telling about, is connecting, right? Meeting people, going into their DMs, engaging on their timeline, and really changing the landscape of how things are being done. Because in the end, the problem is so many people are doing things in isolation, expecting change. But the real way you make change is if you're able to encompass and embody everyone and getting everyone on the same page where they're able to connect to you, connect to their network, and connect to yours. And then we can start creating real change. And so those three pillars are the things that help impacted me. And it started from 1,500 followers to now I believe I have over 7,000. I initially kept it at 6,900 for the culture, but at some point in time, people keep adding themselves. And unless you want to kick them, it doesn't work out.
That's also amazing. Yeah. And
It's a good take on communities, because a lot of people on the outside or on the edge, they look at Web3 community sometimes with like that copy pasta, that GM, which is, I love GM. So I'm not saying anything bad against GM. Whoever came up, I'd like to know the history of the
yeah,
GM,
if
because
we had that on Story Protocol, we would know.
yeah, I mean, it might be a gamer thing. I'm not sure. The first time I saw it, I was like, what the fuck is all this GM everywhere? And then I really like it because I'm over in Asia. And it's like, well, it's GM somewhere for everyone. You know what I mean? So it's just GM everywhere. And I'm like, anyway, what was my point? My point was that it's often looked at sometimes as like this negative thing, but you just shine such a light on it, right, Andrew? Like it makes me want to go, okay, what are the communities out there that I want to be a part of online? And maybe you can shout out some really good positive ones, positive vibes for people.
Yeah, so for me, honestly, it's a recent thing, and they just came out this year at the same time. If things go as well as I hope to, I actually plan to document this and create a little bit of a thread, or I don't know, a long post. But Forbes Web3 has been a
Yeah.
very impactful um, cultural part of my life in 2024. Manny at Forbes Web3, who I met in New York at a dinner, really was transformative because it wasn't because of clout. It wasn't because of Forbes Web3. It was really actually just kindness, just someone who I talked to that, I connected to, and then just had a really authentic, original conversation just
Mm,
about our experience of how we got into this space. And more
mm,
importantly, like why it matters, the ethos of like decentralization and blockchain and community, and how all of those things like have personally changed my life, hopefully have changed your guys' life in a way that says to you, like, I want to be here. I want to be here not because of just the money. Money's great. Don't get me wrong. It creates opportunity. But what it doesn't do is make me happy, because I have to also want the things that I have already. and be grateful and be thoughtful and considerate of others. And what I started realizing as I'm listening and talking to Manny is that this is what she's embodying, this is what she's creating over at Forbes Web3. And a shout out to her because when you see the community and you see it growing the way it is, they actually have a slow roll where it's actually a rolling mint, right? It actually started several months ago, maybe almost 3 months ago, where they're just still minting. And what they're doing is they're qualifying, they're validating, and making sure that the people who are minting it actually want to be there. And how they're actually incentivizing people is actually the opposite. It's not about being tradable. It's actually a soul-bound token. So it's
Mm.
just kind of one of the things you're like, none of this makes sense except for the fact that it all makes sense, right? Having this conversation that we've had from start to end really shows you like how how this topic relates to humanity, relates to connecting to people. And more importantly, like when you look at what Forbes Web3 is doing too, it's about empowering entrepreneurs at some point. Like that's all of us, right? We all have our own personal brands. We all have companies and networks that we connect to. But if we're able to do that collectively in a place that um, gives you the resources, gives you the ability to do all those things, whether it's the pillar of the community or pillars of, how I believe everyone should act accordingly. It's something that I feel is a positive force that I believe, will give people the ability to do more in blockchain and more in Web3, because for them, they have spaces, they have their Telegram group chat, they have things that where people can connect, whether it's like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, but more importantly, like, hey, I want to actually hire people, or I want to like collab and work with someone. And now I have a network that has this opportunity. And so that's what Forbes has been for me. But outside of that, because obviously I don't want to focus only on Forbes, but all the great communities out there, right, that are still around building. I've met so many great people at Yuga with Bored Apes. I've met so many great people over at Azuki. I've met so many great people over at Killabears. And then again, there's so many more. Doodles is great.
Oh,
A
geez.
lot of this Solana at DGods, again, it just depends on what resonates with you. But, for me, community really is it starts with you and how you want to take on the world every day. And it really comes down to how many different communities um, means something to you, right? And again, actually, when I almost forgot, but I do have to give a shout out to Gary V and V Friends. They are
Mm.
a community that's based on the ethos, right? Every character that he built is based off of like an emotion of some sort, right? So like I have an unwavering urchin. Other people love like the empathy elephant or the gratitude gir- gratitude gorilla, genuine giraffe, like all these characters that are really impactful because they stand for something more than just that PFP. They embody an emotion or a stance. So shout out to them because they were the first collection that I came into in terms of my exposure to NFTs. And I'm still a huge proponent and member of that community ever since I got into Web3.
Yeah.
So I thank you for giving me the opportunity and time to kind of shout out some of these people, because without them, I wouldn't be who I am today.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And we really appreciate you jumping on this pod and having this conversation. It's like just super inspiring to hear your perspective on all these things and what we're working on now and where we're all going in this industry. I guess, we didn't even touch on Rug Radio and decentralized media, which is such other massive thing. And hopefully we can continue this conversation and do that again in the future. Real quickly, to kind of wrap it up, what we like to do is just some rapid fire questions.
Yes,
Uh,
these are my favorites.
Before we do that, though, maybe if you want to plug a few things, like where can people find you and where can they see what you're working on next? How should people get in touch if they want to?
Yeah, no worries. So if you want to follow me on Twitter or X, I actually go by my real name. It's Daryl Quan, DARYLQUAN, and the number 8. I go by the Shaolin. It's something that I carried with me in gaming. So the way my wife puts it is like, man, so you're into technology, you're into gaming, and you're into community, and then boom, it's like the perfect intersection. It's like, so what else could you possibly do? And I'm like, nothing. This is so joyous. This is so passion. This is so much my passion. I'm not subjugated to like stay in your lane. I get to do whatever, however, because as you've noticed, when we talk about things, I kind of I know a little bit a bit about everything,
Mm.
and so I can kind of apply those things in the way I do things. And then yeah, that's where you could primarily find me. But outside of that, I think I kind of am stuck on that in that platform, but obviously you can find me by my name. You can see me and find me on Telegram as well, utilizing the Shaolin.
Yep.
And then yeah, I'm happy to connect and talk to people. For me, honestly, like it's a rare thing to say, but anyone who wants to reach out to me and DM me and talk to me, I'm more than happy to give you a reply, because in the end, you never know who you're talking to, and more importantly, like if you can possibly change someone's life just by having a simple conversation, then I encourage it.
Amazing. Yeah, and we'll share links to all of that in the description of
Direct.
this video.
Yep.
Yeah, so people can find you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. So
Yeah.
let's
Thanks
go.
so much, man. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yes,
really
rapid
great.
fire.
Rapid fire questions. So completely disassociate from your, any cognitive
Yeah.
Oh,
activity.
you're gonna
And
get. Yeah, I have this mic
Cut
here
the
that I'm gonna
cord.
actually bring to the forefront, and what I'm
yep.
gonna do is I'm gonna go DGen Daryl, and let's go. Let's do this up.
Okay, let's do it. What did you eat this morning?
Chick-fil-A.
What's your spirit animal?
Spirit animal. Oh, panda.
What's your go-to music choice when tapping into some work?
Oh, see, I was gonna go with gangster rap, but gangster rap doesn't work for work. Work, I actually do EDM.
And when are you listening to gangster rap?
Any other time that I just want to just wow out. The great part about rap too is it's become such a like uniform thing that like when you listen to like country now, you hear rap. So
Mm,
rap is one of the things that's kind of universal now. So for me, it's not always gangster rap, but that's the one I kind of go back to because of like where rap originated. But yeah, not just rap in general, and just anytime, man. And just anytime, because it's fun.
hell yeah.
That is
What podcasts, if any, do you consume on a regular basis?
Ooh, this is a great one. Armchair. Is it called Armchair with Dak Shepard and
Oh yeah.
Armchair something, right? And then the other one I listen to all the time, sadly enough, because I feel like it makes me a nerd, but NPR. I love to gather my news while I'm driving and dropping off my son.
Yeah, classic. What do most people have wrong about blockchain?
keep it short,
That is,
Shao.
that's all about money.
Oh, nice.
Perfect.
Nice.
What's the most underrated NFT collection?
Underrated. Killer Bears.
Yeah.
What's the most overrated NFT collection?
Oh, I try not to put anyone on blast. I want to say Bored Apes, but I'll just leave it at that.
Will AI destroy humanity?
Absolutely not. Humans will destroy humanity.
With AI.
What's your spiciest take this week?
Jeez. Honestly, I was just go talk about parenting. My spacey take is it's the hardest thing, but it's the most rewarding thing. I've had some experiences this week that just challenged me, but then after I made it through, I was like, oh, I couldn't have it. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Beautiful, very wholesome answer.
My sister had a baby yesterday. So,
Congratulations. You
well,
got
yeah,
promoted.
to her,
Is this
I'm
first?
an uncle. Yeah.
Yes, you got promoted to uncle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the most controversial topic in your algorithm?
Algorithm politics. The United States election year, it's politics.
Yeah. And finally, what's more important, fame or legacy?
Legacy.
He
Hell yeah.
mentioned that earlier.
Yeah,
Mm.
I did notice that. Awesome, Shao. Thank you so much. This has been such
Thank
an
you.
awesome conversation, and just
Yeah.
thank you for joining us.
Fun. We'll
No,
chop it up again
I
sometime.
appreciate it. This is a really great opportunity. You guys are so down to earth. The fact that you two can ask the questions that you do and then give me a straight face, given that like you guys are such a great time. I wouldn't have it any other way. And this was a great opportunity. So thank you for having me and love being here.
Yeah, anytime, Shao, anytime. And yeah, subscribe, like, follow, go follow Shao, and
Yeah.
we'll be
Follow
back.
Shao and hit up some of his spaces.
Yes.
Um.
For sure.
All right. I'll see you later, and I'll slide into your DM, Shao.